Good morning, everyone. I'm on my fifth cup of coffee here, so we'll see how the session goes. I really appreciate the chance to be a part of this cohort, and thanks to Lisa and Danielle and Valerie and Kim, you and the board for leading on these kinds of initiatives. I mean, NorCal. And I mean this with all seriousness, has really been an innovator in how we create community over the last few years and increasingly going forward. And so I'm pleased by this, both because I get to experience the chapter and what you all are doing, but also as a kind of a culmination of a lot of work and impact that all of you have had around the NACD directorship certification programs. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I was with Jeff yesterday. Rich, I see you there. I mean, I think back to conversations we had early on in this program 3 years ago, and how much each of you have had an impact as you carry certifications, you give feedback to us and the rest of the team in NACD as we grow this. And so I really want to express my appreciation for everything you all do every day on the program of the certification with NACD and for directorship. And this is a piece of that, right? I'll give you a quick update on certification and where it's grown. But this is about creating community amongst a group of at least in my mind, really unique individuals in the director space, people that are out in front leading on the change that is taking place in the boardroom. And that's part of how we're going to kick off the day today on some of those cutting edge issues there and how each of you are thinking about it. But as we think about the growth of the certification program since it launched in December of 19, we're up almost at 1,500 certified directors. And in some ways, that might seem like it's a big growing group, and that's the intention, it'll grow more. But even at that size, I mean, I want to recognize that each of you should feel a part of a pretty elite group here. Again, setting the future for what we aspire to be the role of directorship going forward. So building on that, trying to create some community for you here amongst your chapter, but as you've done so well to expand that to the broader NACD membership. And this is a first piece there. And I think Kim and others will tee up in some breakout sessions later, ways that you all want to interact and use your time together going forward. So we'll start with a panel discussion today with Kim, Barbara, Sonita, and Alexandra. And then we'll go into some breakouts for some smaller group discussion. We'll come back together and wrap. Do want to acknowledge Onboard for supporting this cohort in this morning's program. I think we'll hopefully hear from a member of their team later. So Onboard, I think, as I understand, has been a great partner to the chapter, Lisa, and really appreciate their support and partnership there. Again, we've seen a lot of growth in certification, nearly 1,500 certified. We're up over 3,500 in the program overall and growing, so more people preparing. I know many of you have spent time with folks that are considering certification, getting ready for the exam. And so really appreciate that, excited by that growth and the energy and enthusiasm. I think many of you have probably seen communications from me or my colleagues about the work we're undertaking to update the exam. So, constant refreshes in the questions and the underlying infrastructure of the exam, of what it is the exam is testing against. And so look forward to the continued collaboration and partnership there. I'm a minute past, but I think we should get started in the real reason we're all here, which is to connect you all as peers. And the way we've set that up today, just to get the mind flowing, the ideas going, is invited 4 of your contemporaries there, Kim Box, Barbara Adachi, Sonita Lontoh, and Alex Morehouse. And I'm going to say they need no introduction. We're going to dive right in. And so what I'd like to do is ask each of them to just reflect for a few minutes on those issues that are most front of mind for them in the boardroom right now, how they're thinking about it. Let's put out some ideas on where things are headed and start some sharing. And Barbara, I'm going to start with you. You're first on my screen here. And so I'd ask that question to you. Like, what's top of mind for you right now in the boardroom as you're going through your board cycles?
Thanks, Marcel, and it's great to be here today with this community and excited about the breakouts too, to get to know some of you more. So in my boards, and actually a couple of them right now, the hot topic that seems to have been on the agenda since COVID is really around human capital and around the people aspect, because while boards, we're all back in person, not all of the employees are back in person. So we're still in that transition, I think, from going from kind of the truly, remote workforce to the hybrid model. And I don't know how this is going to shake out, but where this has really raised, I guess, the discussion is in the boardroom is around two things. First of all, culture of the organization and how it's going to get preserved when you have a distributed workforce. And then the second topic is really around succession. And it's not just the CEO succession. This might have originated in the comp committee or comp and human capital committee, and then obviously onto the board. But it's really around the succession of leaders below the CEO and maybe the C-suite. Because I think in the past, we've really relied on understanding who those leaders were. We got to see them in person. We got to see them at the board. Often had meetings where the next level of leaders would come in and present. And you get a kind of a feeling for who's on deck and who might be the leaders of the future. So you could really see, the talent pool. And since a lot of people are now distributed and even a lot of hiring is more distributed, how are you going to get access to these leaders from a board perspective, as well as what is the commitment to personal development for these future leaders, as well as building the pipeline? So I think it's really succession planning has gone beyond just looking at the CEO and the C-suite level, but really around that next generation of leaders. And I think the whole topic of human capital, I know is top of mind for most organizations, because unless you never, you are 100% back, and I'd say half are 100% back and half are maybe 2 or 3 days a week back, it really begs the question around how this might impact, longer term leadership in the organization. And of course, culture is a big topic as well, because it's hard to preserve it when everybody's not in the same room or in the same same time in the same room. They might be in the room when they come in 2 or 3 days a week, but if everyone isn't there again with the leaders, how do you get that visibility? So that's been discussed in 2 of my 3 boards.
Top of mind for everyone. And just as an aside, I'll share, I heard something interesting recently that I hadn't appreciated, that the US on return to the office, assuming that's the goal, is lagging behind the rest of the world. And I hadn't quite appreciated that. Well, thanks, Barbara. Kim, would love to bring you in now, see what's top of mind for you. And of course, if you have anything you want to add on to Barbara's remarks.
Sure. Well, when I think about the topic, future of the boardroom, and what concerns are in the boardroom, I think about the broad, what's going on in the world. And there's so many things going on that impact our board.
Kim, hold on one second. Barbara, can we ask you to unmute? I think we get some background from you. Kim, you want to unmute. There we go. Could you come off mute, Kim? Thanks.
Yes, I heard that somebody was talking. So again, when I think about what concerns in the boardroom, you have to think about the broader world and what's going on. We have so many things happening. A lot of times there's one thing happening, but now we have multiple things, inflation, all the geopolitical incidents, the workforce that Barbara just talked about. But I did a roundtable recently in a very large group and asked for everyone's concerns. And the one thread that was common for everyone was cyber attacks. And I think as a board director, it's a really interesting place to be, because we're not in the day-to-day, as we all know, we're oversight. So how do we make sure that we're doing the proper oversight and that we have the right things in place when a cyber attack is known? And I say that specifically because I guarantee you everyone is being hacked right as we speak. It's not like, will we be hacked? Everyone is getting attacked. How you protect yourself in those companies and how the board does oversight is so key. The time to find out what your insurance is and how it works and how you would manage an attack is not during an attack. Trust me, I know this. I've been through some situations and you really find out the details. So one of the things that I feel, it's just, how does a board be innovative in general? What can you do to innovate? It's not just the company, it's the board. So how are we being innovative? And I just use cybersecurity as a specific example, because I know we can all relate to it. It's one of those things that you know is lurking, but you don't know when it's going to pop up or how it's going to manifest. So how can you, obviously you can take the NACD cyber oversight, which I've done, and that prepares the board, prepares yourself for how to manage through it. But you need to also consider, who are your partners? Who are your partners in remediation? Who are your partners? And have those partners set up ahead of time, not when you're in the middle of it. And also when you have the opportunity on the board to go through, obviously we all go through insurance and what's happening there, to really look at it and do those round tables or tabletops that we all talk about. You know, you hear a lot about that, but is that actually happening? Are your boards taking it seriously? And how can you know that? Well, you know that by going through a simulation, simulating what could happen and how you'd respond. So I mean, there's so many things that we need to do to innovate. Another area of innovation is just, we saw in the pandemic, I call it, we found out who the wartime and peacetime CEOs and boards are, you know, the people that really knew how to battle through, whether, you know, it was a pandemic there, but there's also, you know, I just gave you an example of cybersecurity. The pandemic was so large and so massive. What kind of innovative things did your board and your company do to get through the pandemic? You know, I say there's 3 phases that people did. They either froze and thought this will be over soon, or they incrementally innovated to survive, or they got super innovative and they implemented things they might have already had on deck that they didn't think they could do as fast as they did. And that 2-year project all of a sudden took 2 weeks. So how can we obviously can't go in that kind of, you know, chaos crisis all the time. That's not good management. But what can we learn from that would show us how we can innovate as we're moving along and be prepared, whether it's a cyber attack or you know, some sort of pandemic thing, or a grid lost, a power grid or whatever. So so those are my initial thoughts, and love to have more dialogue around that.
Thanks, Kim. Sonita, I'm going to turn to you now and ask, because I think you have some sort of variations or going deeper on some of the themes that Kim outlined. So same question to you.
Yeah, great. Hello, everyone. Good to be here with you all. One topic actually to go deeper on what Kim already brought up that is front and center, especially for one of my boards, is how best to effectively govern technology and innovation, especially if your company is kind of like in a disrupted, in an industry that can be disrupted. And so just as a little bit of context, so one of the boards I'm on, TrueBlue, we're in a legacy workforce solutions company. And about a few years ago, we decided that, hey, we wanted to get ahead of this potential disruption. So we embarked on this, call it business digital transformation journey, and to basically fundamentally change the way we do business. So perhaps today I can share a few lessons learned that we have had from our experience. And I would love to maybe learn from the others to hear what their perspectives on what they've seen work well in their board with regard to governing technology and innovation. So some of the lessons learned, you know, the first one, we learned that, you know, it's very important to help management to set the right mindset that, you know, approach innovation and technology as truly part of the company's business strategy. You might think like, oh, this sounds kind of simple, but actually in the beginning of our journey, you know, there's a tendency for management to kind of treat this innovation and technology as a fragmented operational initiative that was the domain of the IT department, not fully integrated into the business. And we felt that, hey, by setting this right mindset, we help management to better prioritize and protect investments, especially today. You know, we're in a challenging economic environment, to ensure that the company don't just focus on the short term, but also on the long term. And then the second lesson is, at least for us, we feel that we need to take a more holistic and integrated approach to kind of look at it not only from the technology perspective, but also from risk, cybersecurity, the investments necessary, the business model transformations, and also talent and culture. And so, at least for us, in order to create the time and space for the board to focus on these various topics, we decided to set up a dedicated standing innovation and technology board committee. And I understand that this is, I think, still an emerging practice. And I read a study that said only 12% of the S&P 500 companies actually have a standing IMT committee. So it's not the right approach for every company, but would love to just hear from others, how are they kind of approaching the governance. And then the third lesson that we learned is having, the right metrics and dashboards. Again, this sounds kind of simple, but in reality, sometimes, there's so many kind of metrics and dashboards, and you are not sure like which ones are actually the ones that you have to focus on to ensure that it's not just about the technology project completion or budgets, but also some of the business outcomes that you're expecting are actually being realized. And also we felt that, during these discussions, it's important to just not listen to the CEO or the CIO or CTO, but also from business unit presidents, from time to time CMO or CCO to understand, customer acquisition and retention, and even from the CHRO to kind of understand the talent needs and the compensation and also the culture. And so would love to just have some discussions with some of you to kind of learn what others have seen work well and perhaps work not so well with regards to innovation and technology governance.
Okay, thanks, Sonita. Alex, gonna bring you in here to round up this tee up here. I think you've got a key issue top of mind. This may be the longest I've been in a director conversation in the last this year where this term hasn't come up yet. But Alex, can I ask you to come on and share? Oh, you're on mute, Alex. If you unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yes, I would love to. I'm very interested to hear from Sonita, and I'd like to build on that. So a couple of boards on which I serve, nobody, first of all, I've never heard of a standing IT committee inside the board, but that's very interesting. On a couple of the boards on which I serve, we have actually asked management to set up an IT governance for exactly the same reasons that Sonita called out. So across people, process, and technology, because it's very easy to focus on the technology. What are the people and processes and the change management? So asking them to report in regularly. So that's a model that I have seen, but it's very much top of mind now because artificial intelligence is top of mind conversation. So the last two meetings I went to, that was pretty much dominating the conversations. And the challenge, particularly on governance, is that the technology is changing so fast because the adoption rate, it took literally 2 months for ChatGPT to be adopted. And it caught most IT departments and companies by surprise because AI and machine learning have been around for 20 years. And that's fairly well known, but these large language models brought up so many challenges that are completely outside of governance. And the meeting that I just attended earlier this week came to the conclusion that it might not even be possible to govern the large language models AI because vendor partners are already building it into existing digital transformation and tools. And we might not even know as a board or even as the IT committee, governance committee, what is actually being used. So that topic has been very much top of mind. And then, of course, another NACD session that was very helpful. We had the Obama administration's prior head of trademark and patenting address the issue of liability because all of these models are scraping both words, images, and data from across the World Wide Web. And many of those are proprietary. So the Getty Images lawsuit is just the tip of the iceberg. So how do we know what is, and there is no case law to support what is happening at a rate of change that nobody anticipated. So cell phones took a full 10 years for adoption. ChatGPT was 2 months. So how do we get on top of the liability issues? And I work in healthcare and I'm using AI extensively for diagnoses, for handling phone calls in many ways. And how does one, again, in a situation where somebody's life is literally at stake, how do you handle the liability of that? So that has been the topic that has been top of mind and is the direct extension of what Sonita was talking about. First, we had digital transformation. You had all these legacy systems that all companies are dealing with, stitched together and digitized. And then the rate of change again has quadrupled as AI is layered on top of it. So those are the topics that I'm spending most of my time and I'm hearing in the boardroom. And I would love to hear from others how they are even having those conversations.
Marcel, can I make a comment on Alex? So I just wanted to say that I've been on a board that also has a technology committee. And the way we did it was the technology committee was created and led by the staff, the CIO, and then we appointed a board member to attend the committee. So the committee had to report to the board, but we had someone from the board on the committee to make sure we had a really strong tie. And I thought that was a nice kind of in between, but I love the idea of a technology committee.
Oh, very nice in between.
Barbara, I saw you came off mute. Did you? Okay, you're gonna hop off. Sonita, well, here's what I'd like to offer. Oh, Barbara, go ahead. You're still on mute, Barbara. Well, Barbara's getting
Okay,
off mute.
sorry.
Okay,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. I'm having difficulties because I'm in the lobby here, but I was going to just ask Alexandra, like, what are companies or your companies doing, boards doing around having policies around employee access and use of chat GBT. So, because I think that kind of falls into the kind of the next layer. Like, I think we're all thinking about this and talking about it, but are you finding that your companies or others have policies in place on employee use that might impact what they're doing at work and also what they're submitting at work or even privately? Are you seeing any of that yet out there?
I have to be honest, there have been multiple conversations and most of the conclusions have been, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know how to regulate it in a way that makes sense because it is such terra nova really just in the past months that nobody has found a way to adequately monitor it and create policy the way we have for social media. Very firm rules and regulations around social media. And this is the genie's out of the bottle and nobody has figured out how to stuff it back in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just saying,
so I would like to
Pandora's
ask.
box.
Go ahead.
It's a Pandora's box. I mean, people are using it on the side outside of their job to help with their jobs, and then trying to integrate into the job. It's very fascinating to see, but it's one of those innovations where you want to get in front of it, not let it whip you around. So again, having that conversation proactively as an innovation versus letting it happen. Anyway, Sonita, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to just add to that. Totally, I think conversations are happening with regards to hard policy. I don't think we're there yet, but I think there is a viewpoint to, of course, not to insert proprietary data into, ChatGPT. And then the second emerging ideas that I have heard is about perhaps having a code of conduct with regard to, just like, we have a code of conduct for the company. You can have a code of conduct with regards to the use of AI at work. But as I've mentioned, these are just initial conversations. There's no kind of like formal policies or code of conduct yet.
I echo that. I was at a Texas Tri-Cities chapter event a week or two ago where the same kind, the prohibition probably isn't going to work because people are doing it anyway. Flip it a little bit and think about giving guidance on what you can do. And we're coming off of the pinned screen because what we'd like to do, we have about 10 minutes before we break out into the groups. Want to open it up to others on the call as well that might have comments, reactions, questions for Barbara, Kim, Sonita, and Alex. So what I'll ask for others to do, if you want to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or even if you want to raise your hand, I'll try to catch it. But let's have a brief group conversation. Would ask you to keep your comments or questions pretty focused and short so we can get as many in as possible. And so let's open it up to the group. Anyone want to chime in? Let's see here. I think RR, I'm not sure who you are. You had a hand up before, and then Mavash, I saw your hand up there. So RR, did you want to come off? And sorry for the RR, but that was the name on that I saw.
Yeah,
in,
no, I apologize. It's Rafiq. I guess the
Rafiq,
question is,
thank
I think Sonita mentioned, using KPIs for technology implementations anyway, implementations. But I think the question the question I would want to know is what I understand is, usually a technology implementation has a realization that happens, 1 to 2 years later, sometimes 6 months. But how do you use those KPIs to understand? When do you use those KPIs to understand the benefit or the realization for the implementation?
Yes, actually that was one of our lesson learned, that technology implementation and project completion and budget only are not enough. But we do ask management to present some metrics that give you an early indication of either operational efficiencies achieved. Does the technology enable us to actually close down some of our physical branches and move to a service center oriented environment? And of course we don't do that with the whole organization, because we have 800 physical branches all over the US, but certain pilot projects and certain service centers. And then the second is to ask whether it shows early indications of improved customer experience, be it from customer acquisition perspective or retention. And last is the hardest, and we are not there yet. We also ask management to kind of tell us what are some of the additional new business models that are of higher growth and higher margin nature that can result from the data and the analytics that the technology has enabled. So to answer your question, actually the lesson that we learned in the beginning, like the CIO, CTO were presenting technology project implementation and budgets. That was kind of the metrics. And then we kind of pushed them to show us all these other business-oriented metrics to kind of have an early indications as to whether or not some of the business outcomes are being achieved.
And I'll add to that, because we're going through a digital transformation on one of my boards as well. And what they done is each of the implementations is tied to business goals, and it's a joint handshake between the business that's involved in those implementation. It's very widespread, very complex. For instance, one of them is an increase in add-on sales by a certain percentage. And so the people in the business have to agree. And I think it's a really nice way. You don't ever want your IT department just leading a change. The business side my whole career was in IT, so I'm very familiar with this, but having that business side be tied to it, if they're not articulating business goals, it's very questionable on whether they'll get the results, if any, that they need.
And Rafiq, if I chime in on one of the boards on which I served that went through a complete digital transformation, the ask from management was large enough that we asked them to bring in a third party to calculate the ROI that put hard numbers on what the top line growth was from new customer acquisition because of improved customer satisfaction as well as retention. And then below the line, what the cost savings were. It was a 5-year transformation. So we asked for the justification before we released funding, and then did a review a year out to see if those costs were actually realized. And it was helpful to have a neutral third party, Switzerland, so to speak, opining on the actual ROI. Was quite helpful.
And was the ROI there, out of curiosity? Can you share?
Very strongly, yes. It was over 12%.
Thanks, Rafiq. Mavash, I want to bring you in if you come off mute.
Good morning. Thank you. Great conversations. I want to come back to what Kim Box said about the pandemic and the sort of 3 categories of responses to pandemic, and then just juxtapose that to AI, because right now AI is the topic, the daily topic. There are some companies who are so fearful of it that they're almost paralyzed, hoping somebody else will figure out what to do about it. There are some companies that are having a reactionary response to it. Yeah, we have to do 1 or 2 things here. Yes, our vendors are building them into their products. And then there's the opportunity to think about really what do we want to get out of it? What changes do we want to make? And I think every board and CEO should kind of have that mindset similar to what I think Sonita was talking about, the mindset of how are we going to think about AI and how we're going to experiment, maybe pilot a few cases or here or there, what governing rules we need to put into place. And I think NACD might be in a really good position to have a sort of an overview tutorial on kind of what every CEO and board should know about AI. So any thoughts about that?
Thanks for the comment. Any reaction from the panel?
We will be doing a AI cohort starting in September. So we'll be having a monthly session on different aspects of AI.
I think it's a really good way to parallel it to the pandemic. Pandemic was very physical, very there. And the thing that's interesting about AI, it's almost like a cyber attack, if you will, because you don't even know. There's so much AI going on right now. People think it's something that's coming, but if you own an iPhone, trust me, there's a bunch of AI going on, as we are talking. It's listening, it's trying to figure out things to serve you up. So to be proactive on innovating and get ahead of it, as opposed to what you need to do to wait and see. Like, I like what you said, if some people are just hoping it kind of goes at bay, but it's not. And so how do you make it, how do you harness it? Almost like a martial arts, when someone comes at you, are you going to harness it and kind of flow with it? Or are you going to just try to hurt yourself, trying to protect yourself? So again, it's the board's role to look at these areas. One of the things that we do on one of the boards that I'm on is we bring in an expert every board meeting, and we pick a topic and we do a lunch and learn. So it's while we're eating, so we're being productive, but we'll pick different topics, cyber, whatever it is. Some of them come back every year because it's so hot topic, but find an AI expert that you want to bring in and just do a talk with your board and see how they might help you think of things differently. I think people are afraid of technology in some ways. A lot of people on boards aren't technical people. So
yeah, and actually to add on that thought, at least some of the things that we've done, and again, this is still in the exploration stage, is to start exploring some of the use cases actually that make sense for your particular business. And initial kind of like emerging ideas that we have, it seems like the use of AI for more of efficiencies, we call it efficiency gains, be it like, initial customer service type of things, seem to be things that make sense for us. You know what I mean? But the use of AI to make important decisions that may affect, like a pretty important decision seems not to be a good use case, because a lot of the AI, models are biased, and we feel like they don't have that capability to actually make important decisions. But for efficiencies, use cases seem to be maybe it's a good thing to explore.
This is a great group here. So the team's going to break us out now.